We've had another message in from David. I think it's a different David to David H. David said, from comments on the programme, it's clear there is no provision for those of us that have led a very active life, and when we come to the point of being similar to a vegetable, there is no way of escaping from that position. I think what David's referring to is probably a discussion about euthanasia, is that right? Which is probably quite a different topic to broach.
Yes, it is. I think...
Yes.
Go on, Arthur.
It is. There were very, very rare moments when my wife turned to me and turned to my sons and my daughters-in-law and said, I can't go on, please take me to Switzerland. And that was very difficult and very hard and a very emotional sort of process to go through. I do not know whether I could speak for euthanasia or not, but I know that some patients do go through that process because it's very difficult. Which brings me on to the other thing, is that perhaps there is a need for some sort of palliative help. I know it's probably a very difficult subject at the moment, but there is a lot of discussion about medicinal cannabis, which is not the same sort of cannabis as the pot, etc. But I wonder whether that would be helpful. I know it would have helped my wife if, as I've read, what it does sort of ease pain. I didn't really want to bring something like that in, and I know the rest of the panel cannot discuss it.
Well, I can discuss it because I don't have any professional involvement. Yeah. Well, not as such, but it's topical because we're waiting for results of a consultation that may or may not instigate further, I don't know, deregulation, whatever you might call it. That's one for the future. But I think just to dwell on something you said about Switzerland, about being sent to Switzerland. I'm not asking for any personal views because this is all subject to legal regulations, etc. But different jurisdictions have different approaches to this thing, to end of life discussions, I suppose, which is something that we can talk about more broadly.
It's very difficult. I think it is.
I think it's. I think actually, I'm grateful that David has brought this up because it's like the elephant in the room, isn't it? It's
yes.
not part of what we're talking about because what we're trying to say to people here is we're talking about the best possible end of life that we can have within the way things are, the laws now,
and quality of life.
Yeah, and quality of life. But it's perfectly true. I mean, let's go back to my father, who was extremely fit, very active man, great brain, as well as you know, as being in good health up to, say, the last 3 years of his life. And every night I used to help him to get ready for bed, and I would kiss him and say, I love you. And he said the same thing every night. He said, if you love me, you'd help me to die. Now, to pretend those conversations aren't happening is just not dealing with real life. We know it's happening, and we know we can't do anything about it. But I think we need to acknowledge it, because it's kind of, we're talking about all the other issues and then pretending that we don't understand that. We do understand that. It's just not within our remit to.
That's right. Yes.
And
I can say too that the number of times I've been asked, just give me an extra injection, just put a pillow over my head. Yes. I've been asked so many times, and no, I can't do that. I can try and make the end of your life as comfortable as I can, but I can't give you the extra injection. I can't put the pillow over your head or the bag over your head. I can't do that.
Quite apart from the legal framework, that's probably enough for a whole separate programme in its own right.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that we can draw from that is, as I say, is the preservation of quality of life wherever possible, and that's something that's been common from all of these discussions, is about trying to maintain comfort and a control over what happens to you. Isn't
dignity
that true?
As well.
Yeah.
It's dignity for the person, that they're not just pushed into a corner and left.
But I think even in response to David's question, obviously we have to stay within the legal framework, but it is really important to have the conversations about end of life, because there's lots of things that I do not want to happen to me when I approach my end of life. And whilst I would talk to my son about what that is and isn't, if I don't write it down and put it somewhere, no matter what he says as I approach the end of my life, I no longer have the ability to talk or think or speak for myself. He potentially could be ignored, because the legal side of things, that we have to follow the legal framework. But if I have put it in writing myself and signed it off in my name, then he can just say, this is what my mum wants, or not, as the case may be.